Welcome, welcome. Today we are going to be diving into a pretty amazing episode where we are going to be getting into some specifics of Minnesota politics. And I will warn you, and I've done this caveat before, with these types of episodes, I understand that, that topic does not sound super exciting. Well, let me tell you, these are the educational pieces that you need to know to be an informed voter and an informed citizen. And today we're going to be diving into the intricate web of Minnesota congressional districts. We're not only just diving into the nuts and bolts of how the districts are crafted, we're going to be getting an exclusive interview with GOP candidate Mike Casey, who is vying for the endorsement in the heart of CD4. So it's going to be a double whammy episode with great insights coming your way, talking all about shaping our future in the U.S. Hi, I'm Jenna Dicks, and I'm always rambling. Just ask my husband. I have a great family and a pretty cool life, but I'm a recovered alcoholic. That's hard to say, but my goal is to inspire and educate to help others hopefully find life beyond an addiction. I'm all things: sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Getting healthy, momming, and politics. Get offended easily? You better stop listening. There is no point in wasting that Botox by stressing yourself out listening to a podcast. Welcome to Ramblings of an Addict with Jenna Dicks. Today's episode brought to you by products and services I'm thoroughly addicted to. Hey there, memory makers and candid capturers. Are you looking for a photographer who turns every moment into a work of art? Look no further than Catherine Smith Photography. From senior photos that capture the essence of your student's unique journey to a heartwarming family photo shoot that freezes time with every click, Catherine has a knack for making your memories last a lifetime. Our family has actually trusted Catherine for years to capture our most amazing memories, including our wedding, all the way to our photo shoots for our family every single year. And we cannot get enough of her incredible work. She brings a fun, lighthearted vibe to every photo session, making the experience as unforgettable as the photos themselves. So whether you're celebrating a senior milestone, gathering the family for a portrait-perfect moment, letting the kids be kids in a playful shoot, or saying I do with the love of your life, Catherine Smith Photography has got you covered. Book your session today and create memories that you will never forget. Capture the joy, capture the love, capture life with Catherine Smith Photography. Catch Catherine's information down below in the show notes. Welcome, welcome. I'm excited to have you here. Today, like I said, it's going to be a double whammy type of episode. We're kicking it off right in the top here, giving you some logistics, some great insight on how politics in Minnesota work. Following that up with a really great interview with a gentleman that is vying for an endorsement in a congressional race right here in Minnesota. But why I wanted to start with some of the logistics, because I got involved 3 years ago. And it has taken me, over these 3 years, really learning as I go about how politics in Minnesota work. But I feel if I had known some of these things beforehand, back when I was just a normal person that would, catch the news sometimes, was living my life and would go vote, if I had some of this insight, I feel like I would have been a more informed voter and I would have had a better idea of what was kind of going on, not only at the Minnesota level, but also the national level. So I want to share this information with you, and we're going to just jump right in. So how the Minnesota landscape works. We have 2 U.S. senators. Every state only has 2 senators. Right now we have Amy Klobuchar and Tina Smith. Both are Democrats. Amy Klobuchar's seat is up next year, 2024. We will have an election for her spot. And Tina Smith will be soon to follow. The next level is U.S. Congress. or House, right? That's what a lot of people are like, oh, like the reps. Okay. There are, I want to say 436 reps in the House at U.S. level. But the Congress numbers are broken down by population. So each state's a little bit different. Okay? And I'll get into the specifics of our Minnesota breakdown here in just a second. So 2 U.S. senators. Minnesota has 8 congressional reps. And then at our legislative level in the state, so these are the people that are heading to the Minnesota Capitol versus, the other 10 of them, the 8 U.S. Congress reps and the 2 senators, those 10 head out to Washington. They're out at the U.S. Capitol. Minnesota Capitol, we have 134 members of our House, so 134 reps, and then we have 67 senators. So if you were to, look at a map of Minnesota and scale back so you can see the entirety of this state, Minnesota, we have 8 reps in Congress because we are broken down into 8 congressional districts, okay, or CDs, a lot of people call them. We have Congressional District 1 is the lower portion of the state of Minnesota. Congressional District 2 is slightly above that. You're thinking Lakeville, that kind of area, up into the lower southern portion of the Twin Cities. Congressional District 3, 4, 5 really just kind of merged together right in the heart of the metro. We split it up. And our congressional districts 3, 4, 5 are much smaller compared to 1, 7, 8, but they're based off of population. So 3, 4, 5 are really small in actual area that it covers, but it still has a ton of people in those areas because you're talking the Twin Cities, okay? 6 is still part of the metro, but it does go a little bit more north, heads up towards St. Cloud in that area. So you do have some of the Twin Cities popping right in there, but also a little bit more of the outstate feel on the fringe. Congressional District 7 is the western sliver of Minnesota, so next to the Dakotas there. And then Congressional District 8 is a huge chunk of northern Minnesota. I mean, CD8 is very large. I mean, it can take, a few hours to get from one area in CD8 to the other area, but that's because of the population. Okay, so that's a little bit of the breakdown of the map. Right now, how it works is we are 50-50 in the state of Minnesota. We have 4 Democrats and 4 Republicans in Congress, okay? So CD1 is represented by Brad Finstad. He is a Republican. CD2 is represented by Angie Craig, Democrat. CD3 is, oh goodness, I can see his face, Phillips. He is a Democrat. CD4, Democrat, Betty McCollum. CD5 is Ilhan Omar, so another Democrat. CD6 is Tom Emmer, who is actually the majority whip out in D.C., and he is a Republican. CD7 is Michelle Fischbach, another Republican, and CD8 is Pete Stauber, who is another Republican. So 4 and 4 is how that's broken down. And the joke is, because I am on the Republican side of things, right? The joke is, Minnesota is looked at as a blue state. But if you were to actually look at the breakdown of the congressional districts, if you were to color everyone's district according to their rep that they have. So if Stauber, Fischbach, Emmer, and Brad Finstad's areas were all colored red and the other 4 were colored blue, the majority of the state is actually red. But because of population, right, those 4 areas that are red have lower population. So that's kind of the thing that some Republicans get pretty peeved off about, because they're like, We are not a blue state. Look at this. But end of the day, we do have to look at population, right? So that's a little breakdown of how it works. So when you go to the polls and there's a congressional race, which happens every 2 years at the state level and at the national level. So when you are going and doing those votes, you are only voting for your specific CD for U.S. Congress. So if you live in, for example, Woodbury, Minnesota, you would not go and vote for Tom Emmer because Woodbury is Congressional District 4 and Tom Emmer is representing Congressional District 6. Okay? All right. So beyond the 8 congressional districts, those are all broken up into smaller divided areas as well. And that's how we get those numbers for the Minnesota House and Senate. We're broken down into Senate districts and House districts and precincts. I'm not going to get into all of that right now because there are hundreds. You know, the state is definitely divided out. Maybe we'll do that in a future episode. Who knows? But today I just really want to keep it high level, especially because we will be talking here in a minute with a congressional district candidate. I just wanted to give that breakdown a little bit so that as you head on in, you're like, okay, what are we talking about? What is a congressional district? So today we are going to be talking to a gentleman named Mike Casey. He is going to be running for the endorsement for Congressional District 4. That means this first essential race that he's in, he will actually be competing against other Republicans who want to run against the Democrat candidate, which Betty McCollum is the incumbent. That means she's already seated. She's already won. She's been in there for over 20 years. But on our side as Republicans, now we kind of have to battle it out for which candidate do we feel is going to be the best option to go against Betty McCollum. Or, you know, let's say she does have somebody even challenge her, because that can happen on her side as well. Okay? So Mike is going for the endorsement. He wants the Republicans to all say, hey, Mike is going to be the best one for the job. And today we dove in, chatted with him a little bit to get his perspectives on why he feels that way. So without further ado, I just wanted to give you a little bit of the background of how the CDs in Minnesota work. But we're going to jump right on in with Mike Casey. All right, rambling listeners. So as promised, we are going to be diving into today talking a little bit more about Congress, and specifically today introducing a gentleman in Congressional District 4, which remember that's in the Metro of Minnesota, Mike Casey. He is running for CD4 Congress this next election cycle, 2024. So he's got a little over a year of running for this race, and I feel incredibly honored to be able to sit down, have a great conversation with Mike, because he is an amazing human. So a little bit about Mike Casey. He is a father. He is a husband. He has been married for 37 years, which anybody who's been married, they know that in itself is a victory and shows amazing strength and endurance in someone's personality. He is a 30-year veteran in the military for 30 years. He has been in education. He's worked in corporate America. Mike brings quite the wide range of experiences as a human being. And on top of that, I have had the luxury of getting to know Mike these last couple years. He is just a kind human. He is a God-fearing man and an amazing human to bring on to Ramblings of an Addict. So, as I said, I am incredibly honored to be introducing Mike Casey. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Thanks for having me. It's a great honor to speak with someone that has such a great podcast.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Mike. I appreciate you saying that, and we are excited to dive into the interview and hear just a little bit more about you and specifically what you're hoping to make happen in Congressional District 4, which, as a CD4 person myself, we need some turnaround.
Absolutely.
All right, Mike. So we're going to jump right in here. can you tell our listeners a little bit more about your background and specifically what inspired you to run for Congress in Congressional District 4?
Okay. A lot of people might ask, why would you run for Congress? You've had a couple very successful careers, in the military and in education. And a lot of people my age are looking at retirement, going and playing golf and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I'm not a very good golfer. My whole purpose on the golf course is to fill the woods with balls.
I can relate to that.
But also, I really have a deep concern about where our country is headed. I got involved in the race for Congress because a couple of years ago, I was involved in the Convention of States movement, the movement that is looking for an Article 5 convention to actually propose amendments to the Constitution to limit the size and scope of federal government, get it to live within its means, and also to put term limits in place for elected and appointed officials. I think that it's time to put this into action. The Article 5 Convention of States is the safety valve that our founding fathers put into place when government got too corrupted and was unwilling to reform itself. And I think that's exactly where we stand right now. But I got involved in the Convention of States, and they said, you need to get involved with politics at the local level. They said you need to find out which BPOU you're in. That's Basic Political Organizing Unit.
Yeah.
Now, 2 years ago, I didn't know what a BPOU was. But they said, get involved in your local BPOU. They said, get involved in the precinct caucuses and in the party apparatus. And if you can, get yourself on board as an election judge and run as a delegate for the party convention, which in 2022 was held in Rochester.
Yep.
Well, I did all those things. I went to the precinct caucuses. I got selected as an alternate delegate, so did get some time on the floor during the convention.
Awesome.
But I also got involved as an election judge, so I saw how elections work in Minnesota from a personal level, and I'm happy to say the precinct that I was in, I didn't see anything untoward happening there. There was nothing questionable, but that's why we have people from both parties as election judges.
Correct.
But I also got involved with May Zhang's campaign for Congress in 2022. I heard her speak at the BPOU convention for Senate District 47, and one of her big campaign staffers I go to church with. Okay. And so I said, your candidate looks great, but she needs a little work on her speaking skills, because May is a Hmong refugee, came to this country, and English is not her first language, and I felt she needed to refine the message. So I got on board with May Zhang's campaign and became part of the inner circle of that campaign. My august title was Director of Strategic Communications for May. Awesome. Basically, I helped her out with speech writing and speech delivery.
Cool.
Because I have a history of decades of competitive public speaking. I'm involved in the Toastmasters organization, and I'm what is referred to as a distinguished Toastmaster. That's about 5% of all Toastmasters. I've spoken in speaking contests at local, state, and regional levels, and I do have some speaking skills. So I helped May with the campaign. We also did a lot of other things, to include phone calling, door knocking, lit distribution, holding signs in parades, the whole 9 yards. And May ran a very honorable campaign. She really worked hard. She was the Energizer Bunny. But unfortunately, did not get elected. She did move the needle a few points in Congressional District 4, but she got about 32% of the vote. So about a few months ago, a bunch of us worked around on her campaign. We're sitting around having coffee at a local Starbucks.
Yep.
And we were talking about if May was going to run again.
Yep.
And at that point in time, it looked like she had not made a decision. But somebody asked me, why don't you consider running? And I said, well, I don't know about that. Do you think I'd be a viable candidate? They said, you've got a great background. We think you should consider a run yourself. So I decided, why not give it a shot?
Absolutely.
It's always been a dream of mine to be elected to Congress. And to be elected to Congress, you actually kind of have to run for Congress, at least in this country.
Yeah.
But anyway, I decided to run. I did call May because I didn't want to step on her toes if she was considering another run.
Right.
And I said, I don't want to damage our friendship. I don't want to step on your toes. And I just wanted to see if it was okay with you if I run. I said, if you decide you're running, I'll support you. And she said, I haven't made up my mind yet, but Mike, if you want to run, go ahead and run.
Awesome.
She said, don't worry about our friendship. But if you want to go ahead and run, go ahead and run. I decided to give it a shot. Now, it took me a couple of months to put the campaign together because there's a lot of things that you have to have in order before you announce.
Yeah.
I had to find a good campaign team. I've got an excellent campaign manager and a good general contractor, as well as a campaign treasurer. And I even have a lady who is my email guru.
Awesome.
And we put a good campaign team together. And then right after Labor Day, I announced my run. We had to register with the Secretary of State.
Yeah.
But I announced my run for Congress. Now, you have to be careful with Congress because when you announce you're running, certain clocks start ticking with the Federal Election Commission, and they start taking a close look at what you're doing. So you don't want to announce that you're running until you have all your ducks in a row and you have actually registered as a candidate.
Yep.
But I've been a candidate now for about 3 weeks.
Awesome.
And we are just trying to get the message out. But I ran for Congress because I think our country and our congressional district are headed in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
I mean, you can ask just about anybody, are you better off today than you were even 2 years ago? And I can state from my own perspective that it's a little harder to live now than it was a couple of years ago.
Absolutely.
Because of the massive runaway government spending, inflation has kicked in.
Yeah.
And it's no mystery why. It's kicked in because we are borrowing money at an unprecedented pace.
Yeah.
It's been projected that the Biden administration is going to have to borrow $2 trillion this year to keep the country afloat. Now, let's reflect on what $2 trillion is. A lot of people can conceive of what $1 million is.
Right.
It's thousands, and that's not too hard to get your head around.
Right.
But $1 trillion is a million millions.
Wow. More money than I can even imagine in my lifetime, right?
Exactly.
Oh, my Lana. It is so sad to think.
It's a million millions, and that's a tremendous amount of money. And although the Democrats have no problem raising taxes, even they realize that there's only so many taxes you can raise. Mm-hmm. The second source of raising all this money is bond sales. And there's only so many bonds that people are going to buy.
Right.
And one of our chief bondholders is China. I don't think it's too wise to be in China's back pocket. But the other way to print money, one which is very popular, is what they euphemistically call quantitative easing. That's a fancy term for ginning up the printing presses and printing more money. Yeah, that gives you more money on hand, but guess what? Dumping that much money into the money supply, chasing the same amount of goods means that everything's more expensive. That's economics 101.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing that really causes the inflation is our energy policy. The first thing Joe Biden did, first day he was in office, was cancel the Keystone XL pipeline. And he has spent the past couple of years reversing all the moves that made our country actually energy independent, to the point where he had to go and beg the Saudis not to decrease production. Well, they laughed at him and they said, we're going to keep the price, we're going to decrease production so we can keep the price high.
Jeez.
Because they realize that oil is not going to last forever. They're trying to make as much money as they can, and they're going to get what they can get while the getting's good.
Right. I mean, supply and demand.
So all this increase in energy costs means that every product you buy, a great percentage of all our products, to include our groceries, come by truck. And those trucks run on diesel fuel. And when fuel costs increases the way it has, everything's going to cost more. So it's no mystery why we have inflation. Now, they're going to claim it's because Putin invaded the Ukraine. But we had this inflation and the high gas prices before that ever happened.
Right.
So I'd say it has little or no, or maybe not no impact, but little impact on the inflation. But Betty McCollum has been a rubber stamp for all these policies.
Right.
She has gone strictly with the Democratic line, and everything's more expensive. That makes it harder for not just my family. I mean, heck, I went to the grocery store a couple of weeks ago, and I did some grocery shopping. I didn't even have a full cart, and I'm buying for two people. I didn't even have a full cart. It was $250.
Oh my goodness. Right.
And that's a lot of money, especially for people that are living on the edge. And
right.
They say that people's debts have gone up so much that we've got $1 trillion in credit card debt in this country.
Right.
It's because people have to make ends meet, and they will use whatever credit they have to do so. I've done that myself from time to time. Rather than pay for it with my debit card, I pay for it with my regular Visa credit card because I'm concerned because money's a little tight.
Yeah.
And that's not good for anybody's balance sheet.
No, not at all. And
so
you kind of touched on one thing I want to dive a little bit deeper on, if it's okay. You touched on the fact that Betty McCollum has kind of been a rubber stamp. And Betty McCollum, though, I mean, end of the day, let's face the fact, right? She has been in office, I think I told you this, Mike, almost since I've been born, it feels like. She's been in there for so many
22 years.
Yeah. And, I mean, she continues to just take the W's every time. But you do, as I already said in your intro, have really great skills and qualities. Tell me a little bit about what unique qualities or experiences you're going to bring to the table that make you the right candidate to come up against Betty McCollum.
Well, first of all, I've got the skills to run a good, aggressive congressional campaign. I've always believed that as a leader, and I retired as a full colonel in the United States Army, I always believed that my success depended on putting a good team around me. I have a first-class team. We're following the rules. We're doing everything we need to do. congressional campaign is not something you can run from your basement.
No.
You have to have pros on your campaign team because these things get federal scrutiny, and especially if you're running as a conservative. Yep. I don't need FEC fines or any of those things bogging us down. So I have put a great team into place. That's the first thing.
Awesome.
The second thing is I do have communication skills. I have excellent writing, thanks to an excellent English teacher I had in high school. He taught us how to write, by golly. And,
a good skill to have.
I have a bunch of college degrees, and I was able to write a doctoral dissertation. And you can't do that if you have no writing skills. But I also have speaking skills that I've honed over the years.
Absolutely.
I think that I would be dangerous in a debate against Betty McCollum. And I also think that I have the skills to be able to go out there and talk to all the constituencies in this congressional district and tell them why we need a change. I can make a forceful argument for that. I'm not shy. I'm not shy about moving outside of my comfort zone.
Perfect.
That's been the story of my life.
Yeah.
I have had, I don't share this with too many people, but I have had a lifelong fear of heights.
Okay.
I'm the kind of guy that you go to the top of the Eiffel Tower and look over the side. I'm not going to do that. But I learned to put that fear into check. And I'm a trained paratrooper.
Wow.
I spent some time with Special Operations Command. I've been on some hairy jumps.
Okay.
But I was able to move out of my comfort zone. And many people would say, why would you jump out of a perfectly good airplane? And, good question.
Right.
But
somebody's got to do it for the military.
Well, yeah. But I've always been about challenging myself, going beyond the envelope.
Awesome.
And doing things that are particularly comfortable. About like making phone calls to donors or speaking to a group that may be hostile to you or being in a debate. These things don't bother me. So I am willing to move outside of my comfort zone because it's time that Betty moved outside of her comfort zone.
Yeah.
I want her to explain why she supports all these policies that have damaged the people of her congressional district. I think she's gotten comfortable being in House leadership. She hasn't had to lift a finger to get reelected and really hasn't done much on the campaign trail. I mean, in 2022 election, we never saw her. Whereas May, the Republican candidate, was at every single parade.
Oh, yeah.
Never saw Betty because she felt she didn't need to.
Right.
But I'm hoping to drag her out of her comfort zone and make her answer some of these tough questions. And maybe she'll decide that it's time to retire. But, I realize that people are good. They're going to come after me. They always do.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, bring it on.
Right. Well, and I know. So
I think I'm the candidate at this point in time. And this is a critical election. If we don't stem the tide in 2024, we could lose our country as we know it.
Yeah.
And I signed a piece of paper back in 1978 that I signed a blank check to the U.S. government up to and including my life to defend our way of life in our American lifestyle and our freedoms. And I take it very seriously.
Absolutely.
And that's one reason why I'm running, because somebody has to put themselves into the breach, because we have to stop this tide. We've got to turn our country around.
We do. And speaking of that, Mike, there's plenty of issues. I think you and I could talk for hours about all the issues we have to face. We want to keep it short and sweet for our people because it's a podcast, so we can't talk for hours. But I'm curious, what are the main issues that you are seeing specifically, in CD4, which in itself I talked about it a bit in the beginning, how the breakdown of the congressional districts in Minnesota work. But CD4, you're looking at suburbs like Woodbury, Lake Elmo, but then you also have more inner city feel because you do have St. Paul and you have some areas like that as well. So what are some focuses that you want to focus on for CD4 specifically?
Well, the first thing, I've already talked about it at some length, is the economy.
Correct, yep.
We've got to turn our economy around. We have to bring down the inflation so that people know how they can budget for month to month. And this affects mostly, it doesn't affect those of means. I'm still, I'm not rich, but, if the grocery bill goes up, a couple $100 a month, I'm still able to handle it.
Right.
But how about those people who live on the margin that are worried about either eating or paying the bills? We have to turn the economy around, bring the inflation down, and I think that's very important. The second area is we have to curb the massive government overreach. The federal government has gotten to be a behemoth that affects every aspect of our lives, down to what our kids eat in their school lunches. And when you look at all the stuff happening today, government has gotten oppressive. We need to put that beast back in the box. We also need to be focused on public safety. People are worried nowadays about whether they're going to get carjacked.
Yeah.
I mean, we even had a vice chair of the Democratic Party get carjacked in her own her own driveway.
Yeah. Yep. Just recently.
And we've had carjackings happen not a mile from where I live in Woodbury. And Woodbury's always been, a safe, nice, middle class or upper middle class suburb.
Yeah.
But we're seeing crime. And a lot of what's driving this is the whole attitude from the federal government on down toward not supporting law enforcement and the rule of law. Yep. And our open borders have a lot to do with that.
Yeah.
What with the open borders, and we have a lot of criminals coming into this country, people of questionable backgrounds. Now, granted, not all of them are.
Right.
But, there's been a lot of people on known terrorist lists, and this is only people that they've caught, not including the gotaways.
Right.
But with the open border comes the increase of things like child sex trafficking and the fentanyl epidemic.
Yeah.
I mean, the cops nowadays carry Narcan in their police cars.
Yeah.
Because there's been situations where an officer opens somebody's trunk and there's so much fentanyl in there that just the dust causes them to go into an immediate overdose.
Right.
And these are the kitchen table issues.
Well, and
the inflation, the government overreach, that affects small business because the regulations your average small business owner has to do, it's hard not to violate a law if you're running a small business because there's so many doggone regulations.
There are.
And, I've been a small business owner myself, and it's gotten much worse. So when you have people that are struggling to make ends meet and want to be entrepreneurs and strike out and do their own thing, it's much more difficult. But the government overreach, the public safety, and just, I think, the general quality of life for people in CD4 has gone downhill. And I was speaking to a key member of the minority community today, and he was telling me that outcomes in both education and in healthcare for a lot of our minority communities are worse than ever. They're some of the worst in the country. And this is in our congressional district. And so what has Betty McCollum done to change things?
Right.
She hasn't done much. She hasn't changed a whole lot. And Albert Einstein said the definition of insanity is doing the same things over and over and expecting different results.
Exactly.
I'm sorry, but rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic ain't going to cut it any longer.
Right.
We need a change in the direction, and we need the change in our representation. And I will be there not to support some agenda, or not to be a rubber stamp for anybody, but to stand up for the people in our congressional district, particularly those that live on the fringe. Now, a lot of people think the Republican Party is the party of the country club and big business. But I can tell you in this day and age, the Republican Party is the party that truly supports the little guy out there who is just trying to make ends meet and trying to raise his family and get along from day to day.
Yeah.
And that's what I stand for.
That's awesome. And, speaking of, you already mentioned, making sure that you're doing your job for your constituents, which is absolutely 100% what you need to be doing. And I'm curious with that then, in this age of information and social media, I'm curious, how do you plan on maintaining transparency and open communication with your constituents, Mike?
Well, I'm going to be approachable. A lot of these congressional reps, you send them an email and you have a staffer that may or may not get back to you. And, I saw this in 2022 was when I was working on voters. Mm-hmm. I didn't see any town halls. I didn't see any of these things, which leads me to believe, is she really that focused on what concerns the people of her district?
Right.
If the people in this district trust me with the job of U.S. Congress, I'm going to be approachable. I will have town halls. I will have regular office hours. I will not hide behind my staff. Now, granted, the amount of inquiries that come into the typical congressman is a lot.
It is.
But I will be as transparent as possible, and I'll never dance around an issue.
Awesome.
When people ask me, what do you think about this? I'm going to tell them straight up what I think.
Yeah.
And you may like it, you may not.
Right.
And it's the same thing in this campaign. I'm not going to dance around any issues and just leave it all out there. If you disagree with me, fine.
Right.
But if you want things going the way they've been going, vote for Betty. But if you want to change and you want to see things really improve for you and your family, vote for change, vote for me.
All right, Mike, and I agree. Absolutely. And we want change. And when you look around this country right now, I think more people are starting to wake up and be like, hey, yeah, I think we need change. So absolutely, vote for that. And if that means let's kick Betty McCollum out, 100%. But even with that being said, we're praying she's out. You're the red person stepping in, new GOPer. But even once you get there, there's still going to be DFLers out in Congress that you have to work with. And I'm curious, Mike, can you share your thoughts on bipartisanship and your approach to working across the aisle so that even once you're there working with DFLers, you are still able to achieve meaningful legislation?
Well, I know that from years of experience, in the military particularly, you're dealing with a wide range of people. And as a leader, and this is Leadership 101, you have to find solutions that get people on board. And now to stick dogmatically to my line and say my way or the highway, gets very little accomplished. Mm-hmm. However, there are some areas in which you can't compromise, and I understand that. But there are many areas in which you can find common ground. And my common ground is going to be appealing to my Democratic colleagues and saying, what's really best for the people? Yeah. What's really going to serve the people? What can we do to come together on this topic so that we're really serving our constituents that we're supposed to serve? Mm-hmm. And part of being a leader is motivating a team and finding out what motivates each person. For instance, if you're on a team that has a variety of people on it, you have to find out what's going to motivate Jenna, what's going to motivate Mike, what's going to motivate Mary, and see if you can find a way to appeal to the things that are going to motivate those people.
Exactly.
You know, what that means is that you really have to get to know the people you're dealing with.
Yep.
I'll need to get to know who the people are on specific issues and what their positions are and why they have those positions, and find out what really motivates them.
Yeah.
And try to phrase things in a way and seek compromise so that you can really get some good things done. And there's a lot of issues where you can take a black or white approach, but what really moves the ball forward?
Mm-hmm.
Now, does someone have to agree with you 100% of the time, or you're not going to talk to them? I think if that's the case, you're going to get very little accomplished. You've got to have the interpersonal skills and the empathy and the listening skills that when you're talking to someone on the other side of the aisle, you're trying to craft a legislative package.
Yeah.
You're trying to get people on board, you know, especially if your party is not in the majority, but even if it's got a very small majority.
Yep.
You've got to cultivate a little bit of teamwork there.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, so much of what we're dealing with today, there's so much animosity, and we are so divided. It seems like teams can't talk to one another anymore.
Right.
You look at this in our own Minnesota legislature.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the DFL has a 1-seat majority in the Senate and only a handful in the House.
Yep.
But they're unwilling to compromise, unwilling to have amendments, and as long as they got the votes, they're going to push things through. Well, it used to be that if your team had a very slight majority, you would try to have kind of a bipartisan consensus and try to build a team from both parties so that your legislation could go forward. And, you know, it should not be in an atmosphere of animosity. You know, yeah. I want to destroy this other person. I want to see nothing of their agenda go forward. And it shouldn't be personal.
No.
I mean, you look at the historical example of Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, these guys would fight tooth and nail. And they would go back and forth. But at the end of the day, they'd sit down and have a beer together. You know, it wasn't personal. But nowadays, it seems that if your enemy or your opponent disagrees with you, get into the character assassination. Let's see how much dirt we can dig up. Mm-hmm. And let's destroy this person so that their agenda will not go forward. You know, we really need to get away from that.
Yeah.
Because when you're so starkly divided, all that does is lead to conflict, and that benefits nobody.
Exactly. And I love how you leaned in on the fact of, you know, find what really motivates each individual person. Because when you have to do that in any job you go into, there's going to be a coworker or two that you're like, I really do not like that person very much, or we don't have a ton we agree on. But you have to find that common ground, as you said, and then find that motivation that they have internally, that every single person has something that makes them tick, right?
I have the communication skills and the training that I think I can bring those talents to bear in the U.S. Congress.
Awesome.
And another reason why I'm running is that, you know, it's possible I may not get elected. You know, that's just realism. Mm-hmm. But I want to provide some leadership on the top of the ticket. Now, granted, the presidential candidate's going to be at the very top of the ticket.
Correct.
But at least in this congressional district, I want to provide a voice of leadership and a motivating force for people to work together. Oftentimes, the reason why our party is not successful is because we spend too much time in the circular firing squad. We spend too much time in our petty squabbles, and the other side is unified.
Yeah.
They move forward almost in lockstep sometimes, whereas we're so busy fighting, we're so busy fighting about the arrangements on the deck chairs that the Titanic goes down.
Yeah.
And I hope to provide a voice of leadership at the top of the ticket in this congressional district so that candidates will come together so that we're firing on all cylinders and we're working together as a party. Now, I'm not going to agree 100% even with people within my own party. But Ronald Reagan used to say, when a person agrees with me 80% of the time, they're not my enemy.
Right.
Let's move the ball forward. And by sitting around fighting with each other, that ain't going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And you nailed it. I mean, we automatically with politics think about, okay, how are you going to work across the aisle? But the truth of it also is, how are you also going to work with your own team? Because you can even look at any pro sports team. They're going to have squabbles within themselves too. So having those skills to work across the aisle and having that skill set as well to help your side run as smooth as possible also. I love that.
That's what a good coach does.
Most definitely.
And I had this situation happen when I was in the military. I had a person on my team who everyone else viewed as toxic. And I was told by several key people, hey, you need to cut her loose. You need to get rid of her because she's just mucking up the works. And I said, I'm not in the luxury that I can do that because, first of all, the Army's not going to replace her if I do that.
Yep.
It's my job to find out what her talents are and to use those talents so this team can move forward.
Yep.
I did that, and I ended up rearranging the complete practices in my office, all the way the office worked. And I said, she is a talented person, whether people like her or not. And we have to find a way to use those talents in a way that'll work with everyone else. And I think I was successful in doing so.
Awesome.
But I refuse to just cut a person off or cut a person loose or marginalize them because we need everybody rowing the boat in the same direction.
1,000% we do, especially in today's times.
Yes.
Okay, so jumping into our next question here, and we already kind of touched on this a little bit, but knowing that you two have been a business owner, I know you know a little bit about my story. I also am a business owner, and I think we both know that the Minnesota landscape for business is pretty difficult. More difficulties coming down the line thanks to last legislation session. But I'm curious, how do you envision supporting small business? And you've already touched on it a little bit with the economic growth, but talk a little bit more about that specifically and what you're going to try to make happen at the district level working at Congress, because obviously that's a little bit different than what the Minnesota legislators are going to do. But how are you going to try to do that at Congress to still bring relief back to Minnesotans?
We need to incentivize small business. Anything the federal government supports with its dollars gets larger.
Yep.
Whether they support, whatever policy you want to talk about, if the federal government throws money at it, it's going to get larger. But small business is the engine of our economy. Most of the jobs in this country happen through small business. And so what can we do to make the landscape better for small business people? First of all, we have to have a regulatory hiatus. At least go with what the Trump administration had. If you want to put a new regulation in place, you have to eliminate 2. We've got to get government off the backs of small business.
Mm-hmm.
And that includes in our tax policy, in our regulations. I mean, some of the environmental regulations that small business owners have to follow are just ponderous. Yes, we should be good stewards of the environment, but we shouldn't be so obsessed on that we kill the golden goose that keeps our country going.
Yes.
And at the federal level, I plan to fight against the massive encroachment of government, fight against the bureaucratic class, which is unelected, but nonetheless dictates a lot of what we do, set the landscape so that small businesses can survive.
Yeah.
And small businesses are probably most closely affected on the state and local level.
Mm-hmm.
The extent to which the federal government is business friendly often sets the tone for the discussion at the state and local level. And so I will support policies that really support small business. And so that when a person thinks of striking out on their own, they feel that it's not an impossible task.
Yeah.
And that they can go forward and do it. And now it's always a risk to start your own business.
Yep.
As I'm sure you're aware.
Absolutely it is.
What can we do to at least make it possible so people are willing to jump in and take that risk?
Yeah, most definitely.
And, how can we help small business, which will affect our jobs, which will affect our incomes, and really an effective small business environment is going to increase the tax revenue to the government.
Yep.
So we'll have more money that we can use for government's key functions. Now, I think we should cut back on a lot of what government does. I think that the federal government has gotten too large, and certain departments need to be eliminated entirely because they do nothing but muck up the works and make things more expensive and more difficult. But that's what I'm going to focus on.
I love that.
To help small businesses, and that'll bleed over into our congressional district, and help a lot for everyone.
Most definitely. And like I said, as a business owner myself, I'm over here clapping my hands because we do need that. We need that support. We need that relief, and I would love to see more people jump into following their dreams and following the God-given passions they have. And if that means starting a business, by all means, we need to make those possibilities happen.
But they can't do it with a massive inflation.
Yep.
People are struggling to make ends meet.
Yep.
It makes people, the situation we have today makes people just want to hunker down and protect what they have, and they're going to be very risk averse because they don't see any upside to it.
Yep.
And we have to break that cycle. We have to allow people to think, yes, I can succeed. I can raise a family. I can reach my dreams. Whereas a lot of people, I think nowadays, have kind of given up on their dreams, and they're all about, hey, I'm just going to protect what I have for as long as I have, and I'm not going to take any risks.
Yep.
Well, our country was founded on risk-taking. You think the guys that started the revolution, they put everything at risk.
Yeah, no kidding.
And we need to, that's part of the whole American ethos.
Mm-hmm.
Is, we're not limited by class. You're not only going to be successful if you're the son of a lord or lady. If you're a peasant, you have no chance. Americans, people can come in with nothing and end up being billionaires.
Yep.
It's still possible here, but with the current drifts towards socialism and more government control, it's becoming less and less possible every day.
Right.
But I want my kids and my grandkids to live in the same country I grew up in, one of opportunity.
Yeah, most definitely. And, you know, with that, I'm curious, because you have a lot of great things that you want to accomplish once getting to Washington. It sounds like your platform is incredibly focused. You have a lot of great things you want to work on. But I'm curious, if you had to summarize your campaign message in just a few sentences, what would it be, and why should the voters in CD4 choose you as their representative?
One of my campaign slogans is a new direction for Minnesota. And folks, I think a lot of people would agree that our country is headed in the wrong direction. Our families are under stress like never before. We're going in the wrong directions as far as financial security, physical security, the security of our nation, because I think a lot of the foreign policy is heading us into very dangerous territory. The United States needs to be respected on the national stage, and at this point we're not. But we're headed in the wrong direction as far as our own security in our homes and in our nation. And I think that the level of discourse has decreased. We are a less successful and less enjoyable and less prosperous nation than we were just a couple of years ago. We need to right that ship. We need to turn it around. As Einstein said, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results.
Yeah.
If we want different results, we need new people at the helm. And that's pretty much the message of my campaign. If you don't like the way things are going, voting for the same old people ain't going to change it.
Correct.
Vote for me, and I will go in there and I will try my darndest to make a difference and make life better for the people of Congressional District 4.
Awesome. Absolutely. I mean, let's get out of that hamster wheel of voting for the same person and then complaining that things aren't different.
Yeah, gee, I wonder why.
Right.
They see no reason to change because they're being returned and returned and returned to the same office.
Yep.
They get comfortable, they get complacent, they're not serving their constituencies anymore.
Correct.
And I would argue that's where we're at it right now.
Yep, I agree. So, a fun question I always throw into these interviews, Mike. I mean, it's fitting with the theme of the show. So, have you ever found yourself addicted to something? And if so, if you were able to find a way to use it to your advantage, or if you were able to overcome it, tell a little bit about, that story.
I've had my issues, and I will say I've never been an addict per se to any physical substance.
Okay.
Although, at some very stressful points in my life, I relied on alcohol a little too much. And, I was concerned at one point at the amount that I was consuming, because I would get home from work and I was so stressed out that, I told my wife, dear, why don't you just get dinner ready? I'm going to have a little conversation here with Mr. Jack Daniels.
Okay. Just a little Jack time,
Exactly. But, a little turns into more and more. And I ended up leaving a very stressful job because I told my wife this is going to kill me.
Yeah.
But I have had my issues in that regard. I've had my issues with being addicted to a lot of the things that our society promotes.
Yeah.
And, our society will lead you down different paths
Correct.
that are not very constructive. And, I am a Christian. I'm a devoted Catholic. I make no excuses for that. And, you can be in this world, but it's like Jesus with the rich young man. A rich young man approached him and says, what do I need to do to be in your kingdom? And he says, follow my commandments. Well, I've done that my whole life.
Yeah.
Well, then the next thing you need to do is you need to sell all you have, give the money to the poor, and follow me. Mm-hmm. And the man went away sad because he was unable to do that. But people get so tied in with all the things in our world, whether it be material things, cars, boats, even, drugs and alcohol, relationships that are not going to fulfill you. And, for a while I went down that path.
Right.
But I decided several years ago that, it's time to fish or cut bait. Am I going to take a step to improve my life? And I put my faith in my Lord Jesus Christ.
Absolutely.
And, when we have someone like that we can rely on, if Jesus came to me and said, I want you to sell all you have and follow me, I like to think that I would not have gone away sad, but would have said yes.
Right.
And, it's not just drugs or alcohol, but people can become addicted. Things like pornography are just as addictive as drugs and alcohol.
Yeah.
And some of those things are so widely available that that's a tremendous problem in our society.
I agree 1,000%.
But, hold on.
You're a popular guy, Mike. That's a good thing.
I guess I am. But we can become addicted to the things of this world, and we can make that our God. Or we can follow the Lord. And, the Lord's greatest commandment is, love God with your whole heart, your soul, and your being.
Yeah.
And then love your neighbor as yourself. Those are Christ's main 2 commandments.
Yep.
And all the other 10 commandments can fall under there. We have to have enough care for our fellow human beings that we really want to go out and make things better. Now, people can argue with me on points of policy and, and all that, but I think my heart's in the right place.
Right.
I'm doing this because I really do want to help people.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to be addicted to. Is serving God by serving others. And I think I can do that as a congressman.
Absolutely. Using that to your advantage. I mean, you lived your life. You know what? I'd rather have somebody come to me and say, I've lived my life. I've took some wrong turns. I've learned from that. I've turned to God. And now using that to your advantage, putting your hand out and helping others to follow him. That's absolutely one of the best things to hear from a person. So,
but you know what? To love our neighbor and even to love our enemies.
Yeah.
It's not recommended. It's not an option. It is a commandment.
It is. Absolutely.
And I pray for Betty McCollum. I pray for Joe Biden. I pray for all those on the other side of the aisle. And I pray for a lot of people who I think don't have their head on straight. And, not to say that I'm Mr. Holy. I've had my share of failures.
Yeah.
I don't judge anybody, but, I do pray for people because based on the evidence of what I see and the evidence of what I've gone through in my life, I think that, I can see where people are clearly headed down what I believe is the wrong path.
Right.
And I have to have that concern for my fellow man. But, I'm trying to be selfless with all this. And, I do really feel that I'm being called to do this.
Awesome. Well, you follow that calling 1,000%. Keep taking the steps forward, Mike. And my final question for you today, in 60 seconds or less, what final notes do you have to share with the listeners, kind of the bow on top of your message for them today?
My final thoughts are, take a look at where you are. Take a look at where your family is. Take a look at your family challenges. I'm here to speak to every voter in this congressional district. Do you really feel that you're better off than you were just a couple of years ago? Or do you feel that we need to change direction? If you feel we need to change in direction, I would like to be a person that helps change that direction. Please support me with your vote. And while you may not always agree with everything that I stand for, I will operate with your best interests in mind, not the interest of some special interest group, or I'm not going to be out there to line my own pockets or to, amass hundreds of millions of dollars like it seems some in Congress do. I am out there because I truly want to help the voters of the 4th Congressional District. And if you give me your vote, I will do my best not to disappoint you.
Absolutely. Well, Mike, I am continuing to pray for you, wishing the absolute best luck as you are out there on the campaign trail. Final note is, where can people follow you? What's your website? Any social medias? Feel free to share that, and I will also make sure I share it in the show notes as well.
Okay, my website is Casey for Congress. The 4 is the number 4. So CASEY for Congress.org.
Awesome.
And I'm also on Facebook. Just put in the Facebook search bar Mike Casey for Congress. It'll come right up. Awesome. I'm also on Twitter, and you'll see me responding to several of Betty's tweets on Twitter. It's M. Casey for Congress.
Awesome. Well, I will make sure to link those in the show notes as well. Mike,
one last thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
I hate to do this, but, best wishes best wishes alone are not enough to keep a congressional race going.
They're not.
I need to raise some serious money. My opponent has already raised, I won't say how much. You can go to the FEC, you can go to the FEC webpage and find out how much, but it's a considerable amount. I need to raise money so that I can make a go of this. And campaigns don't pay for itself. I have paid campaign staff in things like social media and email blasts, and all these things cost money. Please go to my website if you agree with my positions and feel you can support me. Please be generous.
Absolutely. And with that being said as well, because Mike is running for a state position, you can utilize the PCR. So if you are...
Well, actually, this is a federal race.
Oh, correct. You're right. I apologize.
The PCR is appropriate.
Nope, you're correct. I apologize. That was my error. But either way, every dollar going to a candidate, it is a dollar going to what you are hoping for your future, for your kids' future, for their family's future. And I know it's sometimes difficult. I'm in the political space. I know this. Sometimes it's difficult to open your wallet, you guys. But when we are competing against the DFL machine, our candidates need our support. So I will echo that definitely, Mike. So please make sure, if you today heard Mike's message and you're like, oh my goodness, he's right. I'm done voting for the same thing over and over and over. In addition, throw him a few bucks, and if you have a few more dollars, throw those on over as well. So,
I mean, even if it's $25 or even if it's a small amount, I get enough contribution that adds up to real money.
Yep, most definitely. Well, Mike, best wishes. In addition to, asking for those donations, I always say to people, it's the 3 T's that make politics work: time, talent, treasure. And, we need all 3 of those T's for a successful campaign for you. I'm praying for you that the armor of God stays strong as you head down this path. And with that, Mike, I just want to thank you so much for popping on to Ramblings of an Addict today.
Yeah, I think that's Ephesians 6. That's one of my favorite scriptures.
Absolutely. That armor needs to be strong.
Absolutely. Well, thanks, Jenna, for giving me this opportunity, and I'm very pleased and honored that you would have me be a part of your great podcast.
Absolutely. I wouldn't miss the opportunity. Congressional District 4 needs change, and you are definitely offering that. So best of luck, and we will see you out on the trail. All right. Well, as we wrap up this episode, remember that it may seem like these races are in the far off distance, but let me tell you, they are closer than you think. So hopefully with a little bit of the knowledge of how the Minnesota landscape works and how those congressional districts are really broken down, and now getting a little bit more information from Mike Casey, who is running in CD4 for the endorsement, I want you to know that the time to get involved is now. It's important that we all know we have the ability to make a difference. And we have the potential to really shape the future of Minnesota and, honestly, the country. So whether you are a political nerd like me, or, enthusiast, that might be a kinder word, or maybe you're just curious about how things work, it is important that you realize that your voice does matter and that your actions do count. So stay tuned for more ramblings coming your way soon. And as always, keep yourself wrapped in that armor of God. If you have found this podcast helpful and want to dive deeper into personal growth and self-improvement, be sure to head over to my website, jennadicks.com. You'll find a wealth of resources there. There is a little less drugs, sex, and rock and roll these days, but whether you're interested in getting healthy, information on momming or parenting, or politics, jennadicks.com has something for everyone. So, what are you waiting for? Head to jennadicks.com today and start your journey towards personal growth and self-awareness. See you there. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Ramblings of an Addict with Jenna Dicks. Remember, if you are battling an addiction, reach out for help and support. There are many resources available to assist in your journey towards recovery. Surround yourself with a supportive community and never give up on the path towards a healthier and happier life. I appreciate you taking the time to listen and joining me on this journey. As you heard, I'm always rambling. But seriously, thank you for your support and make sure to subscribe and follow my channel. I can't wait to share more with you on the next episode. Until then, keep on rambling.